Good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to the moderator of our session, Dr. Rakesh Bhatia, our panelists, Vaishali Neotia, Mansi Gandhi, and Sashi Vangapalli, the three women entrepreneurs running successful businesses in three different sectors, and all the attendees to this first session of TiE Women Talks. Before I invite Dr. Rakesh to take over the session, would just like to give a brief introduction of TiE and TiE Women. The Indus Entrepreneurs most popularly known as TiE is a global network of entrepreneurs, professionals, and corporate leaders who volunteer to nurture and support new and young entrepreneurs. We call them startups. Founded in 1992 in a Silicon Valley, USA, by a group of individuals with roots in the Indian subcontinent, the community is now spread over 14 countries, 63 chapters, and 50,000 plus entrepreneurs. You can see the strength of TiE Hyderabad chapter on your screens. Each year, we impact over 1,000 plus startups, 6,000 plus students, and our 150 plus charter members strong through our various programs such as TiE Grad for inculcating the culture of entrepreneurship at the college level, TiE Young Entrepreneurs Program for students of class 9 to class 12, open mic sessions for startups to tell their stories and network with the fraternity, VC Connect helps startups connect with venture capitalists, and many more. We actively engage with 50 plus women entrepreneurs under our initiative TiE Women. A brand new global initiative launched across all TiE chapters. TiE Women is dedicated to embrace, engage, and empower women entrepreneurs across the globe. Irrespective of the size of the enterprise, origins, interests, standing, and background, we promise to provide a safe space for our women entrepreneurs. And how do we do this? Women-owned or women-led startups registered in Telangana to register with TiE by filling in the application form available through our website link, hyderabadtie.org, TiE Women, as you can see on the screen. All applicants will be entitled to attend about 12 to 14 bootcamp mentorship sessions that we have planned from 5th May onwards, every Tuesday and Thursday, which will be conducted by our very experienced, successful charter members. We will shortlist a few of the entrepreneurs to pitch at the global competition and a chance to win $100,000 worth prize money towards the end of this year at Dubai. In addition to pitching competition, TiE Women will be organizing a series of knowledge sessions such as these, the current webinar that you're just going to go through, a continuous engagement by conducting boot camps, one-on-one mentoring, and clinical sessions for businesses. Hence, I urge each of you women who are attending today and who have a venture of their own, irrespective of the sector or the stage of the startup, whether you are early stage, seed stage, or still at an ideation stage, you can immediately apply and benefit from the bootcamp sessions. The last date for the submission of the application is officially today, that is 30th of April. However, we are happy to extend it till 4th of May to enable you to participate and benefit therefrom. You can apply and definitely take benefit. And now the last most important request before I introduce Dr. Rakesh. Here are some of the guidelines for all the participants. Kindly remain muted at all times. Use the chat box to ask any questions. Moderator will pick up your question and ask the panelist. In case of any troubleshooting, please seek help of the organizer. On this note, now let us move to the panel discussion. Today's topic is doing business in the new normal. To take us through the topic and introduce you to all the panelists, may I now bring to you our moderator for the webinar, Rakesh Bhatia. Rakesh is a corporate honcho turned entrepreneur, needs no introduction to the Hyderabad ecosystem, being a Thai chapter member for many years and also served on our board for a few years. He is a super mentor in Thai Network, is now building an investment platform called the Capital Net, which is gaining very good traction. Rakesh, all yours from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rashida. It's a privilege to be here today, and particularly a privilege to host three power women of Hyderabad. I think the topic is pretty relevant. We all are going through this. In fact, I don't know how many times we have heard this word, the unprecedented times, right? This probably should be called the word of the quarter or the year. That's what we hear probably 100 times a day. But then, yeah, incidentally, it is unprecedented time, right? And we have never seen something like this in our career or lifetime. Though we have seen multiple recessions, economic downturns, ups, and many things, but then nothing of this sort what we are seeing today. It will be very interesting to see the perspective of the ladies we have today. I'll be giving a quick introduction about our panelists and the power ladies, as I say, of Hyderabad. And why it is particularly more interesting is because they all three of them come from a different background in terms of the industries that they work in. So very diverse perspective that we are expecting to hear today. I would say very different perspective, not just from the point that how they are handling and seeing the situation now, but how they see things changing in the times to come. But before we move forward, allow me to make the introduction. Our first panelist here we have is Mansi Gandhi. Mansi is a serial entrepreneur, currently in her fourth stint of entrepreneurship. She is the co-founder and CEO of Dr. C, a healthcare and diagnostics service provider with about 200 people in about 13 plus cities in the country. She worked in Oracle in past for a couple of years. Interestingly, she was also made several short films and a feature film as well. That's an interesting part, Mansi. I would probably like to talk about that piece separately out of this as well. We'll catch up. But then again, would like to hear your perspective from those angles as well as we move in the conversation today. She's also from the qualification perspective, she's an engineer. Did her engineering studies from BITS Pilani Dubai campus, and she did her MS from Cornell. Thank you so much, Mansi, for joining us today. Moving on, we have pleasure. Thank you. So we have Sashi Wangapalli, again, very different industry. Although she also comes from a background of engineering, studied her engineering, worked in a IT company for several years, but then she found her calling in not in IT, but actually in the fashion, right? Fashion design. She followed her calling, became a fashion designer, and is now a founder of Mugdha Art Studio. She is also an ISB alumni, our very own Hyderabad-based top B school. So we take so much pride of telling about that, right? I feel so happy when we hear, oh, I have a local fellow entrepreneur who's from ISB as well. Well, moving on, she has worked with many celebrities for that matter, right? And she has worked with some top celebrities like Taapsee Pannu, Kajal Agarwal, Neha Dhupia, Sushmita Sen, and many others. Very interesting. Again, I'm hoping to get a very different perspective from the fashion and luxury industry. Sashi, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to the discussion. Moving on, we have Vaishali Neotia. Vaishali is the co-founder and CEO of Merxius. At Merxius, they work on AI and mixed reality side of business or technology. Their investors include the likes of Boeing, right? Again, very interesting aspect. So we saw going from healthcare and diagnostics to fashion to IT, right? And here we have Vaishali from IT. So from that IT perspective is another thing that we are looking at. But then further about her, she's also an alumni of ISB. Again, as I say, I take a lot of pride when I introduce somebody from ISB. She's also an alumni of Goldman Sachs, 10,000 Women, Stanford, GSB, Ignite, and many others. This is an interesting one again, for that matter, and Vaishali perhaps would love to hear some perspective from your understanding of the global perspective after being mentored by Dina Powell, who previously was Deputy National Security Advisor to the US President Donald Trump. And then, yeah, Vaishali has been a very regular speaker on technology, innovation, diversity, inclusivity, and entrepreneurship. So thank you so much for joining us, Vaishali. And from here, we will move on to our discussion today. And again, I said different aspects, different pieces, different industries. A very interesting time that we are going through. And the topic says doing business in the new normal, right? Again, new normal. We're still struggling to find what the new normal is. I'm very curious to hear your perspective about what was the normal earlier and what do you think is the new normal. And further, in fact, if you could add a quick line about, is that normal something which will stay as a normal, or we are expecting another normal in a couple of months? So very curious about quick few lines of each of yours perspective on that. So who want to take that? Mansi, let's go ahead with that.
Sure. So I come from a company that's focused primarily on medical diagnostics. So a large part of what we see is people wanting to get tests at home. And this is already, I mean, I think the acceptance of doing tests at home was already increasing every year for the last 3 years. But I think something like what we are seeing right now is going to probably propel it as an acceptable norm for the coming years. And I think in this specific industry, people are going to be a lot more aware of how they get their healthcare, being a little more proactive about things like their immunity and things like that, just because of how much more this has impacted them compared to earlier. So I think the home service of tests and also people being more proactive about health is possibly going to be the new norm and could be here to stay, much like I think what demonetization did for payments.
So if I hear it right, you say that the preventive healthcare will be more prominent in the coming days from the healthcare perspective than the reactive that we saw in the past. Is that what we hear, or you have a different point to make on that?
Yes, I think the change was already there. More and more people every year have been getting preventive. This could be the tipping point for them.
Okay, so that's from the industry perspective, but I'll be curious and I'll come back after we have perspective from Sashi and Vaishali as well on what is this normal, how does this normal, or what does it mean for you as an individual, as an entrepreneur, and your business as well. So we'll come back to that, but then let's hear what Sashi has to say about it. Sashi, your perspective about the normal.
I come from the fashion industry, and the complete retail chain of segment is zeroed down. We are operating only at 7% of the sales now, and it's getting really tough for us to survive. Initial 20 days was okay, but now moving it to the 30 or 60 days is going to be really tough. And moving to the new normal scenario, we need to really get into the new innovations and new methodologies is what I believe in.
Sure. So yeah, I think that's a fairly interestingly contrast that we see, right, between Mansi and you, right, where it is an absolute necessity as a healthcare aspect, and you get into the novelty, luxury, fashion side of it, which perceivably is not considered as a mandate or a necessity as of today. I'll just take a quick pause here. Go back to Mansi. So we heard Sashi saying 7% of the volumes. What is it that you are seeing from the healthcare diagnostic side?
So specifically at diagnostics, we're working at 20% volumes of what it was earlier. So there's almost an 80% reduction in volumes across the board and across the country. Not sure specifically about hospitals as their revenue percentage is working right now, but I would assume it's similar.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So going to Vaishali. Vaishali, your thought about the new perspective or the new normal, sorry.
The new normal. It's a very interesting term, actually. I mean, if you think about it, we've, like you rightly said, we've not experienced anything like this before. I mean, I believe historically the closest that we've come to this kind of a pandemic is, when the Spanish flu had happened around the First World War, and at that time, the world was this badly affected. Where there was this sort of a pandemic. But then, as we see historically, as we see with humans, we're a very
another call. Okay,
and
after 2 hours, I'll call you. Okay.
Sorry, is somebody talking?
Go ahead, Vaishali.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So as I was saying, but we're a very resilient bunch, and we just figured out ways. There's an Indian term jugaad, which we're all brilliant at. We'll find a way out of this whole thing. Of course, we're all extremely affected. Tech has been affected. The manufacturing industry, which is my sector, that's been affected. In fact, nothing has pushed digital automation on them the way Corona has. It's almost become a forced sort of situation. And manufacturing companies which have never considered being on the cloud are now considering it. Companies are looking at remote working as a permanent, idea. In fact, if you, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but TCS has now planned that, permanently 75% of their workforce will be working from home. By 2025, that's their vision. So I think for me, the new normal, I mean, with everything that's happening, and once the dust settles, one thing is for sure, that remote will be the new normal. A lot of people, I think, are now worried about health and social distancing, and the idea of working from home is picking up. The gig economy has sort of really seen an upsurge. People doing gigs instead of full-time jobs. I believe that's going to become part of this new normal. There's been an unprecedented rise in unemployment. In the Indian case also, I mean, we've seen a lot of unemployment. I think we're the most unemployed now than we've ever been. And with Corona, it's just, this whole crisis, it's just exacerbated that situation. So definitely, yeah, doing part-time gigs, doing work from home, remote working, all of that is going to become very much a part of the new normal.
Very cool. No, I think that's the one interesting thing that I heard between all these things. While we all have been seeing about remote working and all the stuff, the part-time gig is an interesting perspective. Never thought that people would actually move on. I see that millennials, or the current generation, I think it's not really millennials, but the current generation is moving more and more towards doing that part-time gig from remote locations, right? We've been hearing people working from exotic locations, sitting out of a beach in Bali and doing their gigs and stuff. So that's an interesting perspective, right? Let's see how that goes. I'll be very curious to see. I would love to do that too, believe me, right? But then, yeah.
Rakesh, but the actual challenge is what now? Once the storm gets settled down, that's when the actual challenge starts for us.
That's exactly I was about to come to, right? So that I'm still not very clear, and I'm very curious to hear your perspective again on that, right? So right now we see that the new normal is whatever it is. We are working remote. I've heard from a lot of technology company colleagues, particularly, that their productivity levels are comparatively higher than what it was when it was in office. But that's more because probably people are working from home. They have nothing to do. They're working, right? And they're experiencing it for the first time, right? We are accepting it because we know that it is a temporary situation, right? But when we are out of this temporary situation, do you actually see the current normal staying as normal? Because the new normal is different from what it was in past. But what it still does not give a clarity is that the new normal that we should see today, will it be the new normal 6 months later? Because what I am hearing again from the media and the world sitting inside home is despite the lockdowns coming or getting open because of the economic reasons, the virus is here to stay for a while, right? The vaccines are still to be worked on. The virus is here to stay. So will this normal stay as normal, or will this change? If this change is when we have to probably look at each of your industries on how that will be handled, right?
A couple of things here.
Yes. Go ahead, Vaishali.
So so you said that right now, for example, because it's a forced situation, maybe people are seeing high productivity at working from home. But I remember reading about this survey that Microsoft did last year. In fact, it was an experiment. For 1 month in their Japan office, they gave all Fridays off to their employees. So it was basically a 4-day work week, and they found like a huge jump in the productivity. Everybody who took part in it said that they were much happier. The meetings that were happening were much more productive. They were saving on other things like electricity and paper printing, and there was lesser wastage of time. So it was basically 4 days of work and maximum efficiency, rather than you're working 7 days and half the time you're just whiling away, you're taking lunch breaks or whatever. Something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs also experience. I mean, when I started out, I remember I had just assumed that working 24 hours was the answer, and I had to do it. But then what I learned the hard way was the longer you're pushing your body to do that, the less productive you become, because at the end of the day, we're not machines. And so, as far as productivity is concerned, I feel that working from home, again, it's individualistic. I don't think it would work for everyone. With our own employees, we've seen in the past, there are certain employees who actually produce much more effective work when they're working from home, and the others need the office environment. They need the social aspect. They need to be able to be in a place where they have other people working with them to be productive. So that's probably going to be a little individualistic also. And the other thing, about where we are and where we're going to go, again, it's all extremely filled with variables right now. We've already been in a global economic crisis, so to speak. In India itself, I mean, we've been on a downward spiral, right? I believe Moody's had predicted that this year we'd have a 2.5% GDP growth. I'm not sure of the exact number, but it was the lowest that it's been. And after the entire COVID situation, I believe it's dropped to 0.2. That they're saying that India is going to grow in 2020, that GDP is going to grow by 0.2%. So if you look at that, it's dismal. And my industry, for example, manufacturing, it's virtually stopped. I mean, automotive companies are manufacturing ventilators rather than cars. So we're all definitely affected. The first impact is being felt right now. The second, third, the tertiary impact will be felt, as over the period of this year, and we'll still see where we head. But one thing that I'm very sure of is that we definitely will bounce back. As I said earlier, we're so resilient. And apart from that, I also believe it's a great opportunity for innovation. There'll be a lot of innovation happening in many ways around how you work, when you work, what kind of work you're doing. All of that is going to happen. I mean, I believe it's an opportunity. It's a glass half full kind of situation, the way you look.
Oh, very, very interesting thoughts there. In fact, we'll come back to the economy wala part as well, Vaishali, in some time. But then again, what you say is perhaps very, very relevant for the technology industry that we see around us quite a lot talked about. But then we all know, right? Our economy is still largely non-tech, right? It's still retail. It's still many other businesses, and we have the other two ladies who represent those two different industries, which are non-tech, which are dependent on people out on the road, out on the ground, getting into the stores, buying things on the ground. So I'm still curious. Again, coming back to Sashi, you were saying about that, right? How does that change for you? Say, even if you assume that lockdown is open from 3rd, or maybe even a month later, whichever it is, hopefully sooner than later. What do you see changing for you?
See, if we all really be very practical about it, if we think that this COVID situation is going to be normal in the next 1 month, it's not possible. If on the realistic grounds,
Correct.
we entrepreneurs need to understand how is the storm going to be over and how are we going to come back out of the situation. We need to analyze this is pandemic now. Maybe after 6 months or 4 months, it's going to be epidemic, and then eventually it's going to be sporadic. This entire process is going to take 1 to 2 years, but this is not going to go immediately. Now we need to understand we are working in the retail segments. Let's assume that maybe after a month or so, June or July, this gets done and we open our retail stores. But the consumers are not going to come for us because it's deeply now in everybody's head that no, is the infection still there? People may not come out. Still, the buying patterns are going to be different. Absolutely now. Now, the biggest thing is now for all of us, none of the expenses are on our head other than the salaries and the rental part. But once we go out and then try to serve, the scenario is going to be completely different. In that too, in my manufacturing segment, I deal with the migrant labor who have been traveled from all across India. I have an employee count of 300 to 400 people, and all the migrants are still here. Neither they have work, nor I'm able to go and give them the work. I tried getting all my people to the factory initially to at least do some work, but it's highly risk for all of us. I mean, we are able to support for a month or so, but if this goes on more than corona, the hunger strike, the hunger is going to kill them. That's the biggest fear we have. And the manufacturing sector is totally different. We cannot apply the work from home scenarios, or we cannot apply any of the digital technology. Yes, coming to the e-commerce in my segment of the manufacture, we can apply in selling the goods. But other than that, the work from home option doesn't work. But we are going to innovate in a way how we can pull a better mechanisms to make them understand, train them, upskill them. The new norm has taught us that. Definitely, to see the optimistic side of the things, we need to understand how the consumers buying thoughts are going to change eventually. We are trying to understand the persona of the people and their mechanisms of working now. And that in the luxury segment, like us, maybe I see this way. The curve is not going to be completely flattened, or it's not going to be a V curve. I see it as a U curve, because maybe it's going to be drip completely down, take a straight line, and then maybe by December or Jan, it's going to be little start rising. We are absolutely down by 30% now.
Sure. I think that's a very important part that you said, right? So how do you take care of your employees who are the migrant labor, and how long can you take care of them by yourself in absence of the real business happening? But then Vaishali mentioned, you also mentioned time to innovate, right? So do you think turning digital, particularly in terms of sales, is a possible solution that you see? Why I'm saying that, because I know that we're having lived for a couple of decades now, what I have seen that human memory is very short-lived, right? We forget most of the bigger challenges pretty soon, right? We may go careful, but we may the spending patterns may take a little while to revive, right? To come back to where it was. But my gut feel says that people tend to forget soon. They would soon get into the old societal piece, particularly coming to your segment where the so-called big fat Indian weddings will be back in place, and that's your primary segment. Do you think with to strike the balance between the fear and the habit of forgetting and coming back to that part spending pattern, would you need to go digital, or is there any other way for you to come back?
Rakesh, I think, see, in our luxury segment, maybe people will differentiate between the necessary commodities and the non-necessity. Maybe people who spend on a lehenga for 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs may come down to spend at 50,000 or 60,000 and get done with the event. Because now going forward for 6 months, no more social gatherings, maybe 100 or 200 in a whatever the big fat wedding was there, it's going to be a limited version is what I feel. But still, in India, this tradition of the wedding and the culture is deeply rooted. Maybe there is going to be a decline, but I don't see a zero lash out over here, in especially the luxury segment, because this entire corona may hit the mid-level segment of the clothing sector or the apparel industry, but the luxury segment may come down by 20 or 30%, but not beyond that is what I feel. And coming to the people in the way they spend, now as there is no income for 2 to 3 months, I think people are going to be extra cautious if they want to spend or not. That's the first thing what I have noticed. And second thing is, though we try to push up products, though we want to do sales, the only thing I hear from my clients is, sorry, we have canceled our wedding or postponed our wedding to the next year. So we all need to wait for that scenario. Hopefully, this everything goes on a normal thing. And coming to the digital,
Sure.
definitely with the millennials in place, manufacturing segments also have ample amount of opportunities to go digital and reinvent themselves. This COVID has taught us to pause, to rethink, and re energize the way we are performing. See, we entrepreneurs are running, juggling, running everywhere every day. But we don't really think about, see, we are working, but how far are we impactful? How is our methodologies taking forward a next step? I myself, I was so occupied with my day-to-day operations, but in this scenario, I'm able to understand what are the technological advancements I have to make in this industry, or maybe I can integrate the artificial intelligence in the clothing segment and how people may perceive. So there is lot much scope for digital transformation in the present era. See, we all have to be optimistic, and that is the first first psychology of an entrepreneur. How we are going to evaluate the situation and come out of this COVID and be create a better employment for the people is what we need to understand. But the biggest threat in my industry is these migrant labor are not going to be available for us after the lockdown, because first thing, they're uneducated and they're so afraid now. Once the transportation starts, I clearly see 50% of the labor will go back to their hometowns. They feel that this is more dangerous than staying at their home with their family. So reforming the teams and getting them back, my economy is going to be down by a year or 2 years is what I feel in this manufacturing segment of the industry.
Sure, sure. I understand that. I just hope, sincerely hope that it's sooner than that. But then, yeah, I'll now make a quick switch to Mansi, right? Mansi, again, would like to hear your point on this. Plus, also would like to initiate that aspect of or the background of this whole panel where we say it's part of the Thai women's talk, right? While I would like to hear your perspective, similar to what we heard from Sashi and Vaishali, but I also would like to understand uh, uh, the balance of inclusivity and women in the business while on the field that you may have, right? So as I said, let's break it into two. First thing I would like to understand as a non-tech business, how this is impacting, how you are managing the people on the field. Even if you are doing 20% of the business, I'm sure you have people out on the road, in the ground, visiting people, visiting the patients' homes and all that stuff. And second, how are you managing that situation with women, particularly either on the road or in the office?
So one clarification, we're actually a tech company in the healthcare space. So a large part of how we actually function is how we build the technology. So all three of us
Sure.
co-founders are software engineers. That being said, because we are delivering healthcare, a large part of it is operational. And
Sure.
we've managed to, so in the office, across all our teams, we have about a 50% women, part of the employee base. And for the technicians on the ground, it's a smaller percentage, but we do have a lot of women, especially in the northern states like Maharashtra and Gujarat. For in terms of management, it's been fairly fluid. It doesn't change. We actually have exactly a 2-member ops team to manage a really large team of technicians on the ground, because we work in an app model, much like Uber, where their appointments are assigned to them. I've seen the impact of the current situation more with our employees who we've needed to move to work from home. A large part of it, for example, is our sales and support team. We have people, we've been able to very easily transition them to working from home. And like you said, this has been new for them. So they've also been able to adapt to it. They've put in a lot more effort to, make sure they work really well. What I do find though is that just because of how traditional households in India are, a large part of the domestic workload also tends to fall on the women. And the majority of the women in my office tend to be mothers, wives, daughter-in-laws. And they now have to add this added workload of having an entire family at home all the time to do all the work, plus actually manage their work, which is something I don't see the men in our office having to deal with necessarily that much. And we've tried to find ways of making it easier for them, giving them additional time off, trying to make sure that we're cognizant of the fact that there is a difference in the mental and physical workload that happens between the genders, especially when they're all forced to be at home all the time. I think this is also especially true of young mothers when their kids are, a year, 2 years, 3 years sort of thing. That's what I've seen with the employee base. With the technicians on the ground, I think as frontline healthcare workers go, they've been very responsible about how they've taken this on. And it's actually, I think, in a way, ignited this need for them to make sure they are serving the customers really well. So I think the motivation has been extra, even though we're not directly fighting with COVID, we're actually providing diagnostics. But as frontline healthcare workers, the empathy is definitely a lot more now. And again, we see this more with women as well.
Sure. Yeah, so while I have my own set of questions, we have also started seeing a flow of the audience question coming in. So I'll probably keep juggling between questions coming in from audience and my questions that I have. A couple of interesting ones coming in. There was one on the inclusivity, which you already answered, Mansi. There's one. Okay, yeah,
Rakesh,
this one.
just a quick thing.
Yes.
To what Mansi just said about her, female employees and this whole superwoman tendency that we all have. Women are liberated now. We're going out and working, but we're still expected to do everything at home plus everything at work, which is just not feasible for a lot of people. Which is why we see so many women, dropping out of the workforce, once they're married or once they have children or whatever the domestic commitments. So. I just wanted to point out here, and as a forever optimist, I think this whole lockdown situation might actually, and maybe Mansi will be able to tell us a few months from now, might actually change things at the workplace, because now I think a lot of men are also getting used to doing work at home and contributing to domestic.
So.
I think it's a combination of both. They're learning to do work at home and also probably realizing that the work that was done at home by the ladies was perhaps far more valuable than they ever realized.
Yeah, so I think that's one positive outcome.
Yeah, very valid point. In fact, that was one thing on my list as well, that how we see that mindset evolving as the situation passes by. But then, having said that, going back to a question which is common on my list and coming from the audience as well, and perhaps Vaishali, in fact, Vaishali and Mansi both will be able to take that. Is the data security, right? When we talk about work from home, there are two parts of data security. One is our own IP that we are working on, right? And if you are particularly working with the global clients, how do they take your response to data security when your employees are working from home, and how you are handling those things? So Vaishali, let's start with you in that.
So from my understanding, there are all of these platforms which, for example, GoToMeeting, right? Or Zoom, and now Facebook's come up with their own platform, which is like a competitor, I believe, now to Zoom. All of these people have their own security protocols in place for meetings that are conducted, sensitive information that's shared. And in general, enterprises have systems in place for collaboration and the transfer of data. So those, I think, are already in place, and a lot of companies now, of course, like I said earlier, are being forced into a new level of digital automation which they have not considered earlier, and are sort of rallying together to bring that into place. But it's not been that much of a challenge from my understanding. Because they already had those standards set for the general work from home situation, or working between offices across geographies and all of that.
Sure, but then yeah, in technology services company, what I have seen at many places is that while the customer you may be working with may have their own standards, but when it comes to the outsourced part, they still get a little finicky about it. Do you face that as well?
We haven't personally, but because we all, we all use secure platforms, and as far as confidentiality is concerned, all the agreements are in place. So we haven't faced any issue around this. But maybe Mansi can share a little more.
Yeah, so Mansi, your thought on that? How about particularly your IP for that matter, even if it is not the global outsourced customers or anybody? I'm sure there would be something which you would be worried about and already taking care of.
So we were always, every time we built something, we ensured that there was multiple levels of angles of security that we were looking at. Especially as a healthcare company, we want to make sure the healthcare data of the patients is very secure, because we do manage their EMRs. Additionally, there's no leakage of customer data that goes out. So one of the biggest things that we had to make sure is when our sales force moved to work from home, that there was no way that they could actually leak customer data out, because they do have access to our CRM and stuff like that. That was the only thing that we had to keep in mind. The rest of it, we were already fairly in the right place even before the pandemic. So it's only the working from home that added that much extra level. But I think it's people who have clients is where they would have to have a additional layer of security managed.
Understood. No, that's a fair point, right? And particularly with healthcare, it becomes sensitive. And what is interesting is just a quick observation that COVID or not, you guys were already prepared about certain things in certain aspects for a remote work environment, even if it is not the hardcore laptop infrastructure or anything, which I believe nobody was ready with a complete set of equipment to have the whole workforce work from a remote location. But then from the basic infrastructure planning perspective, seeing that you are, I think, says that our industries are getting more and more progressive for that matter. Right? I believe that the typical large services companies who still are, I would think, suffering with the inertia of older technologies and in terms of infrastructure are probably going through it more. Right? That inertia is something which slows them down.
I just want to add that I think, like us, a lot of the startups have their in-house phone sales and support teams built off laptops and mobile phones, not really like the large BPOs, which is desktops and landline-based calling. So
Correct.
I'm sure that a lot of the startups were able to, for us, it was everyone take their laptop phone and go home.
Correct.
And it was as
I
simple
think
as that.
most of the startups are doing
Yeah.
that. It's a smart move to do. I'm glad you're doing that. Congratulations.
Hmm.
Another interesting question that has come up here, and I will after that I'll probably go back to my question and then come back here. The first one that I see now coming in is I don't know how to put that. See, we generally are reactive in nature. If I'm just trying to rephrase that question in terms of my understanding that we are reactive in nature. So COVID is happening, pandemic is happening, and we are reacting to the situation. We believe this will be a new normal, and we'll be ready for that normal. And that has happened several times in past. Something happens, we react, and we think we are ready for future. But then something new happens, and then we are again trying to get ready for that. We are never ready enough, right? So it's a cycle. It's a vicious cycle, and that's what that question also says. Uh, do you see any situation where we can say that we are actually future proof, we are ready for future, or this cycle will continue forever? Open question. Any three of you can pick that up. I believe Sashi is picking that up first. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, see, in this kind of situation, only the agile adapters are going to survive. And our journey is completely unpredictable. Every time some or the other problem pops up, and we need to reset our cycles again and again. So there is no fixed platform or model where we can run for few years. Yes, maybe whatever the solutions we bring out of this situation, let them not be short term, maybe they can be long term. We need to put ourselves in a situation where approve something where we don't really, if some attack happens again after 6 months or 1 year, we should not be in the same situation of unprepared. This is one kind of situation which is related to the entire global.
Sure.
Can I just take that
I
from a
understand
separate
that, yeah.
angle?
Yes, Mansi, please.
So I think what Sashi said is absolutely true. It's being agile that matters. I think especially as a startup, the balancing act between growth and profitability is always there. And as a startup, you always go through like massive expansion, consolidation, which is also similar to balancing growth and profitability. So if you're agile enough to switch between the modes and you're very aware of what each mode actually means, I think tough times can be handled fairly well. Irrespective of what you're normally hit with. If you're able to actually switch between those two and you're very aware of what each of those entails.
I mean, we can be
Are
agile.
you trying to say in different words?
I mean, I just wanted to,
Go ahead,
Mansi,
Sashi, I'll ask that.
I want to understand we can switch the modes only in between the strategies and the developments, but not in terms of the workforce management or the segmentation. That's what I'm facing the challenge right now.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, mine is a very long-winded answer, but we can take it as a.
Yeah. No, I think what Sashi is going through, even I'm trying to think if I had a good point to make on those. That's a tricky one, Sashi. But then, yeah, coming back to what Mansi said, Mansi, what you were trying to say, that do you anyway trying to say that, so while you say switching between different modes, are we talking about having a practice of the common term called BCP, which generally startups and the smaller companies do not have, or you had a different thought around it? Because I think as a BCP, or the business continuity planning, and the emergency response plans, most of the companies generally say that they are prepared for the times which are probably difficult and unforeseen, right? But then still, even despite all those BCPs and everything, all the large companies are going through what is happening right now.
I'm talking more in terms of how you're looking at allocating your resources and how you're looking at allocating growth, right? So when you're looking at expansion, assuming you have, positive unit economics and you're doing things correctly, you're going to allocate a lot of resources for future development, for future expansion, and that's where a lot of the company is. When it comes down to consolidation, you stop investing into the future and you only look at your current business lines. And since you have positive unit economics, it actually kind of works out for survival in that sense. And as a startup, I mean, you'll see all startups go through massive expansion, then they look at consolidation, then they look at expansion, consolidation.
Correct.
When you're able to actually analyze all your revenues, all how your money is being spent, and make sure what can be switched and be agile with that, I think it is much easier to manage tides that come and go.
Sure.
I don't know if I answered your question.
So yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, go ahead, Vaishali.
To add here, in terms of, just looping back to what you were talking about in terms of, can we ever be prepared? Something like this happens, we bounce back, and then, are we ever really fully prepared? I think, we can take this at two levels, individual as well as at the work level. If you look at it from the, from the work standpoint, a lot of the smaller companies, the startups which haven't, say, raised a lot of money or don't have huge teams, they're actually being much more sensitive and empathetic in terms of their workforce. And you see the larger companies are furloughing and firing just left, right, and center. And even if you consider the idea of having a BCP in place, which all of these companies definitely would have, in just a month or less than 2 months of this entire crisis, the number of layoffs we've seen globally, I believe, and this might be controversial, but I believe there's more to it than the corona impact. I think it's probably in many cases they're using the excuse to do what they anyways wanted to, because there is it's at the end of the day, if you're just firing people, the logic behind that is I don't get it. I mean, you follow them, I get that. Have people take, say, unpaid leave, I get that. Get them to pay them half the salary, I get that. But just firing them and saying once we're better, and we will be better, we will bounce back, you're not even needed anymore. Considering the fact that after all of this, it's going to be very difficult for people to find new jobs. And so at the end of the day, I think a lot of this is also bringing up the idea of ethics and morality, and how people are looking at it from from that standpoint. And corona, I think this whole crisis has just sort of really pushed that out. We're seeing it at every level: political, individual, professional, social, all of these different levels. And then just the other part of the thing with being prepared at an individual level, I think individually we like I said earlier, also as humans, we're very resilient. We learn from our mistakes. We bounce back. But again, this obsession with being prepared and being anxious about the future is, at a philosophical level, also what prevents us from living now. I mean, look at at the start of this whole thing, the way people were just buying toilet paper and 3 months supply for themselves, with absolute disregard for other people. I mean, you have your neighbor who can't wipe his ass. Why would you want that? You have enough toilet paper for an entire year. Why would you do that? This is just, it's like this each man for himself mentality, which we saw in many places, especially countries which are much more capitalistic. And on the on the good side, we also saw a lot of people who genuinely thought about other people and were like, okay, let's just get as much as we need, and then we leave things for other people too. At that empathy level. So how prepared you need to be. It's about it's not just about you. It's about you being a social person. It's about people around you. It's about just bringing out the basic empathy in you as a human, as an individual. And maybe not being this anxious and obsessive about something that's not in your control. In the future definitely isn't. And as everybody's seeing today, with this crisis, this is beyond geography, beyond race, caste, creed, money, everything. And this is the opportunity for all of us to actually realize that there are things which are not in our control, and all we can do is really, be better humans at the end of the day.
Indeed, indeed.
And I have a point to add
No, I
over
think
when you're asking, Rakesh, when we
yes,
are
Sashi, go ahead.
asking how prepared are you guys for these kind of situations? See, we can be prepared with the situations of the profit and loss ratios or the global economy down or the depression or the recession. But how can we be prepared in the case of the death or the mortality rate? These kind of scenarios, we cannot predict. And when it comes to situations like this, all we have to do is survival is the need of the hour. That's the only thing I see.
Oh,
Later on, we can
I agree
conquer
with
the
it, Sashi. I think
yeah.
these situations have to be lived when they occur. I don't know if we have a good answer for that. I 100% agree with you, right? But then, from preparedness perspective, I think what, again, as a moderator, I'm not supposed to give the views, perhaps just moderate. But I would say that there are ways where you can at least be prepared from the economic standpoint
Definitely.
to handle the situations. That probably will bring a little more. The situation probably may bring a little more sensitivity to the younger generation, which is not as sensitive towards that part of life. So that's what I would say. But then switching gears here, I would just move to a few of my questions, come back to the audience again. The one thing which I wanted to bring from the perspective of the overall theme of Thai women as well, right? And we covered few questions here from that aspect. But I'm very curious here, as women entrepreneurs, right? And we just heard you said that, okay, this is beyond caste, creed, race, religions, or anything, right? But is it beyond gender as well? Do you face or see any more or any different problems than your male counterparts as entrepreneurs?
I think there's some disturbance with someone talking.
Yeah, I hear my own feedback.
Someone talking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
I
are
think
hearing
there's a
the
lot of.
echo.
Okay.
So did you get my
I just
question? You would like to repeat?
Okay, it's all breaking for me. I don't know if it's breaking for everyone.
I'm hearing some feedback. I don't know, one of the speakers probably. It's okay now, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to say a
Yeah.
quick thing here. So when you use the term woman entrepreneur, I personally have an issue with usage of that term. Because at the end of the day, an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. It's gender neutral. We've never heard the term man entrepreneur. I don't know if anybody else has. I haven't. Or being defined by their gender. So an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. We're all entrepreneurs here. You, I, Mansi, Sashi. Putting a tag in front of it is just, to me, it's sort of identifying the obvious. What's the point of that? Are we separate from, entrepreneurs as a general term? Is there, just because we're women, so one of the core things that I personally believe in is the idea of entrepreneurship, of running a business. At the end of the day, it's about creating value, right? You create value. You're solving someone's problem. You see that problem might be replicated across different people, entities, and and that's how a product is formed, where you're solving multiple people's problems, and it becomes a viable solution economically for both parties. They're getting value, and you're getting value. In the middle of this, it's us. We have created these biases, which are conscious, subconscious. And gender is a big part of it. Ideally, like I'd like to think that we're heading towards a world which is more hinged on equity. It's beyond equality. I don't think it's about equality anymore. I think it's equity, because we do need the impetus. Women who are entrepreneurs do need a push. They do need an impetus. They do need platforms like this. But very often, it's forgotten that this is still part of the whole, that we still need to be doing business with everybody in the world, and not our own clubs or our own organizations, or with each other, because it's an inclusive world. And so like I said, ideally equity is where we're headed, but there is still a lot of bias that exists, and a lot of people are doing great work in trying to address those. In fact, there was this study in one of the Nordic countries where they conducted an experiment around conversations of investors with entrepreneurs, and they found that all the and these are people who thought that they were very neutral, very professional, purely business oriented. The questions that they had for the men who were pitching centered around their goals and their ambition and and their vision. And the kind of questions they had aimed or geared towards the women who were pitching were around safety and security and stability. And these, the investors were surprised to find out were subconscious. They weren't consciously asking these things or centering the questions around these things. So I think that the first step is to recognize that we have these kind of subconscious biases which are gender based, and then the next step is to to realize that there's a big change that's needed in the system, that people irrespective of gender need to be included in the whole. A starting point of that could be having sub organizations. So Thai Women or all of the other organizations that are coming up, brilliant. And then the next step needs to be include us in the whole, because that's really what value and business is all around. And at the end of the day, even us ourselves, we go into a room when we're pitching to a customer, to an investor, when we're working with our teams. The thought is at the top of our heads is not that we're women, it's that we're entrepreneurs. Being a woman
I'm so glad you're bringing that up.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're bringing that up, Vaishali. I think I have always been an advocate of probably the same statement, not just from the gender perspective. I've had a debate with several investors outside, and when they say that we are minority-based investors, I always used to say, what do you mean by a minority entrepreneur? It's like going back to the reservation system that we have been hearing and struggling, right? Why would you not just look at the merit and look at minority or gender or anything? So I'm glad you're bringing that up. But having said that, you also said that there are subconscious biases that exist, right? Considering that they still exist, right? Even if they are with whatever shape and size. Going back to my question, do you feel that different, or do you guys feel a difference in handling that whole situation today in comparison to your male counterparts as entrepreneurs for now?
I'm handling it as
the same
I bring all of me to this as a woman, as an entrepreneur, the person I am, as an empath, whatever you call it. So I think this is probably individualistic. I don't know if it's different for you guys, but for me it's just
No,
it's
I
all
don't
of me.
see. I don't see any way, because we all process, think, and ideate in the same way. I mean, women or man, at the end of the day, it's the idea which has been thought out. And especially in this situation, everybody is equal,
I'm so
effective.
glad you're saying that. Thank you so much. Mansi, your thought?
Same thing. I think my two male co-founders are going through exactly what I'm going through together.
Sure. No,
Karuna
I'm
did not
glad
know
that.
Rakesh, Karuna did not knew that it has to get into the female or the male body, at least now.
Most of the situations for that matter, Sashi, as you all are rightly saying, most of the problems do not know the gender, caste, religion, origin, anything, right? Whether it's a virus, it's a disease, whether it's an economic downturn or anything, it just knows that it is a problem. That's it, right? It's us who probably brand it.
I mean, at least in these kind of tough situations, we all are understanding humanity is above everything.
Agreed. So yeah, so I'll again switch back to the audience questions. I know we're almost an hour now, just a minute short of an hour. I'll come back to the questions that audience are asking. So I have some of the pointed questions here as well to the panelists. So this one I see is Vaishali. Do you see any change for AR and VR in India post-COVID, both short and medium term?
Oh my God. Okay, so AR VR as a whole, I mean, the person who's asked this, I'm assuming, is from the industry. But for those who aren't, let me just give you a quick idea in terms of the tech and where it has been. So since 2015, every year was supposedly supposed to be the year of AR and VR. And it's 2020 now, and that's still not happened. And we understand that for the next 2-3 years, it's still not going to happen. There's several challenges around this. There's a hardware challenge. There's a data transfer challenge. Maybe with 5G, for example, things will become better. But we don't know when 5G is really going to come. There's a challenge around the adoption going beyond the novelty factor. So VR as a whole has been on the sort of downside of things even before the COVID crisis, and this has really thrown up in fact even bigger challenges for AR/VR, especially in the enterprise sector, because a lot of the companies who were using it or intending to they're not really operational right now, or their entire strategies changed too. Like for example, how we've been pushing XR. And if you look at the hardware manufacturers, we're not hearing anything more on the Google Glass. They had come up with an enterprise edition, and now they've stopped work on that again. Apple hasn't said anything else about when they'll come up with their device. A lot of hardware companies have shut down. Magic Leap just recently laid off, I believe, 90% of their workforce. So, the situation around it growing is not looking likely. And where it already is, sectors it's already in, there will be movement, of course, but I believe with the corona situation, a lot of the priorities would have changed. In some cases, because in general, I believe the entire industry has moved towards a savings versus growth approach. And in that case, if there are use cases which can be found where XR can help in savings, I believe it could be useful. But around growth and around novelty, I don't think there's going to be anything on the upswing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'll switch to Mansi again. I'm just taking the pointed questions right now. That's why I didn't further ask the sub question to it. Though I have my personal thoughts and a few more questions around it, but I'll go to Mansi now. Hearing echo, sorry. Yeah, so Mansi, there are two questions which I see pointed to you. Do you think there would be policy level decision in the food habits or the nutrition? That's the first question. I'll let you answer that first, because second one is a little disconnected but pointed to you again.
I think, like I said earlier, people are going to be a lot more focused on building their immunity and being proactive about their health. I'm hoping that attitude goes beyond 6 months. Like you mentioned earlier, as humans, we tend to have very short memories. So we do have a tendency of relapsing into old behavior. But I do hope that people take this a little more seriously as, a sign for us to be a little more proactive about things.
Sure. So second question, which is kind of again connects to the policy level, is do you suggest that government should work on, and I personally know that there is some work that is happening, but I'll let you get onto that. Do you suggest government should work on the citizens' health history, right? So EMRs basically, where the action could be much faster in situations like this?
So I think when the government comes to managing health, it becomes a lot more philosophical, more than structural than when we start talking about things. On one side, you have the American system, which is purely insurance-based, where the EMRs are managed by the insurance companies or your hospitals. The other side, you have countries like, United Kingdom, where the entire thing is government-based. I actually think the Indian mode of functioning is ideal, where you have, part government, part private. It has actually helped us as a country manage healthcare far superior than many of the other quote-unquote developed countries do manage their health. I do think the government should have better primary care facilities, especially in the tier 3 rural, those where the access is much lower. I think this is a sign that they need to start bringing access more to people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, and also a sign that more of the focus, even around government healthcare, has been around tier 1 and tier 2 cities. I personally am not pro the government managing everyone's EMR from that standpoint. I think it's a little too big brother for my personality. I would I would not promote it. I also think it is impractical. I don't think a country our size should have to manage that kind of data. I mean, it could lead to a lot of questionable practices if if it did come down to stuff like that.
Sure. So again, like I said, I'm taking these pointed questions. So this one is manufacturing. Sashi, I'm coming to you for this. Though the individual who's asked the question seems to be from more of a B2B manufacturing and sales, right? But the question is how to handle the core manufacturing activities in the new normal, right? I know that you partially touched upon it in one of your previous statements that you're talking about, but would you like to elaborate a little more on that? And if you can bring some thoughts around the B2B as well, would be appreciated.
See, earlier, whenever we used to manufacture the products, we used to experiment in a lot of design innovations. We used to succeed and fail in a lot of design innovations. But now I feel that we have to be very strategic in whatever the designs we are developing. And the employees who are going to work with us, we have to make sure we're concentrating on the productivity levels also. I don't believe in downsizing the company, but I believe in getting more productivity ensured from end-to-end level. And also, in order to put your manufacturing factory levels up and high, you need to identify the different supply chain mechanisms now in the new normal, because all the doors are going to be closed. All the international export and imports are closed now. We need to identify the different set of clientele now whom we can cater now. That's what I feel. And first and foremost thing is you have to educate and make sure your employees are up, compassionate, and understand their needs so that they don't leave you and go at this point of time.
Sure. But then anything on the technology perspective that you can think of?
It depends on the your product innovations which you're doing in the technology wise. I would believe in getting to more of digital transformation now. That's what I believe in to get creative now.
But do you see some situation in future, and this is probably just an add-on from my side, not the audience, but do you ever see some of the where the heavy machinery or the assembly lines are not involved, those kind of manufacturing ever being done from home? I don't know, just a wild thought.
No, because in our factories we deal with a lot of machines, right? We cannot automate that code and produce, because we involve a lot of stitchings where the masters, the karigars, the Indian artwork has to be done in the factories only.
Sure. So it looks like AR/VR is lot in demand. So I'll probably take a question or two on that again. Okay, so AI and VR, I'm just reading it exactly. Innovative technology interventions are very expensive. How can startups invest in such a pandemic, and how many manufacturers invest in such products, even if somebody builds it?
See, AR and VR right now, we may not invest immediately, but try to understand the entire process flow which happens behind. Maybe after 6 months or 1 year, trust me, guys, the entire manufacturing segment is gonna move into digital. We are gonna only produce the garments at the back end, but the entire selling process is gonna be digital only. So AR may add a special advantage for us, at least in the clothing line or any other. And for us in the clothing line, we deal with more of the touch based, feel fabric based. So a lot of people still inclined to come to the stores only, but all the NRI clients, whoever wanted to buy, AR can add a extra effort in getting the job done. Your profit sales, your revenues, everything can increase. See, whatever the X amount you're investing in the technology should give you 3x of sales numbers. Then only you invest. Just because AR is fascinating, it's not applying to your product line. Please don't go with that.
Sure. Any provider's perspective, Vaishali?
Yeah. So I would like to. So AR is just one part of many of the new technologies, right? I mean, if you look at from the B2B perspective, or manufacturing companies moving towards Industry 4.0, it's a whole amalgamation of different technologies which go together as an entire system. At the end of the day, technology exists for us to make our lives better. For companies to be able to automate, to make their processes faster, go to market faster, and all of that, right? AR is one technology out of it. You have AI, you have big data analytics, you have IoT, you have robots. So all of this sort of throws in with the basic idea behind being able to make companies more cost efficient, to be able to increase productivity, and to go to market faster. Around the specific ask of how can small companies get access to these kind of technologies. Okay, so the technology is very accessible. It's it's where you're using it, or the medium of using it, that is probably a concern here. Like for example, with extended reality, it's not about the XR. There are enough open source outlets available. There are enough companies in India as well as outside working on these solutions around the technology, the core technology. It's the access to the hardware, for example, especially from the Indian standpoint, which is extremely difficult. Anything we import, with import duties added, it just becomes too expensive for the average person to afford. Companies also balk at at purchasing hardware. In fact, it's not just India, even globally. How many headsets have sold, right? If you look at it from that point of view, how many Facebook headsets have sold? How many Microsoft HoloLens have sold? And in terms of whether this is going to be useful or not, it all boils down to the first thing that I said about running a basic business. You find a problem in an entity which is which you can solve, then you figure out whether that problem is worth solving, both from their standpoint as well as yours. And then that's how you go into the problem solution approach. And if it's something that's worth solving, that company will pay you for it. Money won't be a concern at that point, right? Because they see enough value to want that solution, to want that product. The problem with specific standalone XR is that especially in India, the adoption initially was more for novelty than anything else. And even though there are a lot of very real B2B use cases which exist, which have also been hampered by this entire situation. But the mindset behind only wanting to do a proof of concept, or to use these technologies to show that it's something new we are doing, that's not going to get anybody anywhere. There has to be enough value seen in the entire chain where you know that you can get beyond a POC and go into an actual contract. Otherwise, forever you're just stuck in a pilot purgatory, which is not at all what
similar to what we were saying about. So pretty much what you were saying about our individual lives during the lockdown and post that, we realize the necessity and pay for it, right? Or that's how the whole spending pattern is coming to. And here also, as I understand what you are saying, if there is a real use case, there is a real need, and it's solving a real problem, the customers would pay.
Exactly, and XR has faced a challenge with that. There aren't enough people believing that it can solve big enough problems to invest heavily in it, which is why the industry has seen the downswing. But again, going forward, XR in conjunction with some of these other technologies, for example, augmented reality and artificial intelligence, and machine learning, for example, all of these can really skyrocket a lot of processes. But then that's what Industry 4.0 is all about. And that's essentially where the industry is heading. And I believe that in many ways, this entire pandemic has pushed companies towards adopting a more digital automated process in their existing processes.
Awesome. So there's another question which is though from the audience it has pointed to Vaishali, but I probably would like to bring it to all three of you, right? Because I'm sure you will have your own perspective to it. And this is about the sales, right? So right now the sales for every business, for that matter, has been very personal, right? A lot of meetings. In your case, when you talk about Vaishali talking to the corporates, right? To talk about, to go meet them, be there on the ground, present. That was the mindset. If you look at Sashi, it's all personal, right? It's all one-to-one thing, and I believe to a fair extent that has been with Mansi as well, right? So starting with Mansi, I would like to understand how do you see the change in the sales process happening post COVID, even if considering virus stays or does not stay, right? I don't know what post COVID is when it is, right? Say considering post 2 months from now, say up to a year and a half, and long term, short to long term. How do you see change coming into the sales process from each of yours perspective? Mansi?
So I don't think this current pandemic is going to impact sales processes for a company like ours. But I do feel, like I said, I think things are going to be a lot more focused on safety, on convenience. People are now also more used to things at home. I think a lot of the incumbents will need to adapt to that kind of a model of sales. So, incumbents, either hospitals being labs, will now need to actually address the online customer, the customer that actually wants them to be home to follow a certain process. Swiggy, Zomato, us, we've kind of set standards on what safe home delivery or safe home service is. And I think that is going to be expected also from incumbents. In terms of the actual sales, process, I don't think, or at least I do not anticipate anything to change over the next few months.
Okay.
Not in
How
our
about you, Bansi? Sashi? Okay. And Sashi?
Maybe in our industry, the entire retail has taken a backstage now. So the sales which happen in the malls and everything are going to be really down for the coming at least 3 to 6 months in terms of numbers, because there are going to be no walk-ins as much as we had earlier. And coming to the standalone stores, that kind of culture is going to build more, and the sales in those kind of stores are going to be more. But we have to make sure to educate our clients that the entire sanitization process has been taken place, so that it builds the trust in the customers that they can step into our stores. In that way, we can build our sales little higher. And apart from that, we need to invest a lot of energy in building the digital technologies and the networking involved in that, to get connected to a lot of people, because this 3 to 6 months, a lot of people have been mentally, physically attached to the online buying process now.
Sure. And Vaishali, a very different set of customers for you, both domestic and international. Your thoughts on that?
See, personally, I believe that this entire sales process overhaul is going to be very industry specific. I mean, if you look at, for example, the travel industry, complete overhaul, right? They probably are one of the worst affected industries currently. Tourism industry, hospitality, and their processes would be complete overhaul. For instance, if you look at Airbnb, which is built on the sharing economy, and that's faced a huge slump right now. They've already started, changing their process of, people staying at, or booking an Airbnb. Between bookings, for example, they're mandating that the house owners give a gap of 24 hours if they can ensure full cleaning. If not, then 72 hours. All the cleaning needs to be done by the house owners between every visit. These costs will obviously again be shared with the consumer, and the person who's traveling is going to be bearing it. Will people even be traveling anymore? Will people want to after this whole situation settles down? So so their processes are different. If you look at the manufacturing industry, companies are already changing what they're doing, right? Like automotive companies like Ford and GM are manufacturing ventilators instead of cars right now. And if you look at even tech, with everything that's going on, it's a demand and supply thing. I think more than sales for us, it's a marketing issue. Getting to the customer, I think a lot of how the world is going to change, especially for my industry, is going to be based around inbound marketing, because even digital marketing, logically, that's going to become the norm of the day, because conferences, expos, the main centers of marketing for B2B companies is now out of the question, and we don't know for how many more months, right? That's essentially where most B2B marketing or sales happen. Now, if that's taken off the table, you have to look at ways of inbound marketing. You have to look at digital marketing. Digital marketing too, we don't know where it's going to go, because Google Ads recently, they reported that their revenue has faced a slump. And so if you look at how this is going to change, everybody's still on tenterhooks. Everybody's still very unsure. We don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, the change will be there, and there will be a lot of innovation. And I personally think the focus will be on inbound marketing, on a lot of stress on also referral marketing. I think it's just basically going to be around that.
Awesome. No, great thoughts, I believe. I will take one question which is incidentally pointed to me. Yay, somebody thought I can answer. But then, I would like to hear their perspective on that as well, because this is more about generic entrepreneurship, right? And somebody asked, and I will probably give my perspective and then come to you. I'll take this first. Yes. So yeah, so somebody asked, what is the suggestion for the entrepreneurs to be Is this the right time, or should it be postponed? Uh, I don't know. I probably been asked this question and answered it zillion times in last 2 months, 3 months. I can understand the dilemma of anybody who wanted to be an entrepreneur. But then, yeah, see, again, I think if we go back to this session itself, and whoever is asking this question, and I'm bringing your attention to all the past conversation during today's session itself, it says that if you are working on something which makes sense, which solves a real problem, I don't think any time is a bad time. I do believe that even this time is a good time, because by the time you actually are ready with your solution, take it to the market and ready to sell, it will be quite some time. And this time, being particularly when things are slow, it's easier to quietly think, talk to the customers with the real requirements, bounce your thoughts back and forth with them is easier because of comparative availability of the people. In fact, what I have also seen, if you have already done that initial thought process, gone off the napkin and have done an MVP, I see that most of the investors who were earlier not available are comparatively more available now, and they are paying more attention to your decks, right? They are able to give you some time to talk, which generally was not easier, because if you look at them, they part of their whole business is to network, go out, travel, attend sessions, speak, and all those things are off the table now. All they are doing is focusing on the core business. So again, coming back, if you have a real problem that you are looking at, I think this is a great time. You should go ahead and work on it. One thing you have to be sure of, that you are economically stable enough to last for quite some time, right? Because even if it is a great idea, will you be able to make it big immediately after the so-called COVID is over or lockdown is over? I don't know, right? I don't think anybody would have a good answer for that. But if you already have some customers who are ready to support you, yeah, nothing like it. So again, if I have to break it into two parts, I would say for a real problem, yes, it's a great time to start. On the second side, make sure you have fair amount of economic calculation done for yourself, so that you get to the point where you actually make it big and do not think of closing it down and going back to your job. That's my perspective. Would love to hear from the ladies if they have anything to add on that, or a different perspective as well.
I feel that make sure your finances are strong enough to support your idea and survive it for the at least next coming 6 months to 1 year. Understand if your product is in line now, do you have the consumers? Or if not, try to understand the entire scenario and get into the world after a quarter or so is what I feel.
I would
Yeah,
just like
Anybody
to go
else?
back.
sorry, go ahead,
I
Vaishali.
Okay, so I would just like to go back to what I was saying earlier in terms of, I believe that the mindset is now shifting towards savings versus growth. And so if you're able to find an entity, and find a way, to solve a particular problem of theirs where you're able to show them, massive savings, and that's a solution that you think, would work, and you validated it, and there's value on both sides in solving that problem. That's something that could work. Industry specifically, for example, food, or healthcare, for example, right? These industries, if you have ideas around these, they would be on the upswing, because there's some, food delivery, for example, or medicine delivery, or manufacturing for medical equipment, or companies which are making medical equipment. These kind of things will would actually be on the upswing. So if you have solutions around that, great. But in any case, corona or no corona, or whatever the situation is, if you're going to start up, if you're imagining that you're going to be an overnight success, and you're going to be at the next Facebook, let me just break that bubble and say, 97% of companies shut down in the first 3 years, because everybody doesn't have that story. And at the end of the day, it's all about creating value. It's like going on a road trip. This is an example I give all the time. The trip is about reaching the destination and the journey. It's not about how many petrol pumps you went to. A lot of people think that, investment, every time that there is investment, raising money is the goal, right? They're starting a startup because they want to raise money. That's not how it works. That's just supposed to be a fuel for you to get through your journey or to get to your customers. So if you're able to create value, give value, get value, that's really, those are the fundamental reasons that, getting into a startup, are important. And if you look at, the idea of whether you'll be successful, not successful, if you're looking at shortcut to success, that's not at all reality. Any number of stories you read from inspiring entrepreneurs, from companies who've been there, done that, you'll see that they're all saying it's a journey, it's patience. It's not going to happen overnight. In fact, one of the Twitter founders, I believe, is very famous for saying that behind every overnight success is 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears that nobody talks about. And so if you know that, then then you're probably a little better geared towards starting a company.
Awesome. Mansi, your final remarks, because I see the screen changed and I see Nandita coming in. So yeah, your remarks probably will treat it closing. Yeah.
I just say there are actually a lot of large companies built around during economic recessions. Recessions tend to have at least 2 plus points when you're starting out. One is that the lack of availability of free capital forces that you look at your unit economics and your finances a lot more prudently than you would otherwise. And the second thing is a lot of opportunities that may not be evident otherwise start showing up during recessions. So if an idea or something that you're looking on looks viable at this point, and like all of them have rightly said, you're in it for the long run, you absolutely must go ahead.
That's a brilliant point you brought in, Mansi. In fact, I would just add on to that, and I'm fairly, I would say, blessed in terms of opportunities that I get to interact with several investors globally, right? And one of the things they say is that they are slowing down the activity of investing is not because they don't have money or they are fearful of the economic slowdown. One of the bigger reason is that they say that we are trying to determine what we thought was relevant yesterday will actually be relevant now after this situation. So what you said absolutely makes sense, because a situation like this many times bring out lot of opportunities, business models, and even technologies or the use of technology, which otherwise was not that prominent or obvious earlier, right? So I think it's a good idea to keep your eyes open. Even if you are an entrepreneur and had an idea, reevaluate. It may not be the relevant idea, or maybe sometimes all those people who were saying that it's or rubbishing it a month back, maybe it's a little more relevant in today's scenario than it was probably a month back. So great piece of advice. Thank you so much, ladies. I will probably pass it on to Nandita from here. Dr. Nanda Sethi, all yours to tell whether we did a good job. Ladies gave a good good thoughts of theirs. Did people like it? Or yeah, go ahead.
I'm just here to wrap it up. So it was a very wonderful, awesome session with 3 young entrepreneurs from 3 very diverse fields. All of you sharing your your challenges with the new normal. So I think when asked what was the new normal, each of you had your own views. For example, in the healthcare, I think people are going to be much more conscious about the way they deal with this after the post-COVID, and preventive healthcare is going to be the thing that people are going to focus on. And even though she shared that we are working at 20% volume, I think this consciousness is going to continue, and we will definitely see a surge in this segment. Fashion segment had a different, Shashi had a different viewpoint. Fashion is not an essential necessity at this point of time, and so there is likely to be a great fall in business at present. But I'm sure we are optimistic that the new normal will always bring about new peaks in it. And though it is just at 7% of volume, obviously this is a time which I think every business, and more so I suppose in this business, it's time to get innovative and look out new ways of doing things. Vaishali, of course, was very emphatic about saying that it's a forced situation for manufacturing sector. Remote will be the new normal, and gigs economy will see a surge. Where AR and VR will gain is where it can actually reduce costs, where the use cases can reduce cost. And overall, it may not see immediate growth, but the cases where you see it helps in reducing the cost, that will be the segments that will really see a surge. Is this new normal going to continue, and are we going to be on a newer platform after this? I think there is a lot of uncertainty. Impact will take time, and there will be, of course, new opportunities, new normals happening after this new normal which we see today. And each of the segments are going to see new normals after this happening. As for Shashi, in her segment, I think it was more about the big fat weddings going away, and the customers have to be sensitized. They're really worried to really go and at this point of time spend or even go to shopping malls to shop. So they really need to be kind of sensitized to the way shopping is being done. In fact, things will change. If you look at the way your teams are going to change, again, I think for the healthcare sector, there was not much difference because you are already, working remotely has not been very difficult as it is a digital platform. But again, in the manufacturing sector, where so much depends on, the karigar or the person working at your end in the fashion industry, it's not easy to get these people who are migrant labor, and getting these teams back is going to be difficult. But at the same time, I guess you'll have to think of new and more innovative ways of doing things. When it came to, I think, security issues, all the three of you didn't seem to have any issues about privacy or security issues working digitally, and so in the new normal. In the end of the day, I think it's going to be sales volumes are going to be impacted. Nevertheless, once again, I think all the three segments are going to be differently impacted, with the healthcare definitely seeing a surge, and the other two are probably having to be more innovative in the way they try to create the products, have the sales channels, and especially in manufacturing, learning to digitize a lot of manufacturing is going to be the new way. In the end of it, I think you all wrapped it up very well, and the way the things are going to pan out is still for us to see. But end of the day, when it comes to people working with you, I think what came across from all three of you was that it is time to be a better human being at this situation, and not to fire people like many companies have been doing. In fact, the smaller companies, as you all shared, have been much more empathetic. Survival is the need of the hour. Resilience and agility is the name of the game. And when it came to the gender aspect, I think all of you agreed that it's not about men and women. The virus does not see what entrepreneur you are, and every entrepreneur is going through this, and therefore it's going to be same. It's nothing to do with being a man or a woman. So thank you, ladies. It was such a wonderful session. So many lessons to be taken from different sectors. And thank you for sharing your personal experiences and your challenges and what's going to be a new normal. So thanks, Shashi, thanks, Mansi, and thanks, Vaishali. And thank you, Rakesh, for beautifully tying up the three segments for us and for telling us what the new normal is going to be for all of them. At the back end, thank you, Rashida. First, thanks, Rashida, for putting up this whole thing for us in Thai women. I'm sure there are going to be many more like this. And what all this brings out in the end of the day is we are going to bounce back. It's going to be a positive, whichever segment we are. Only we have to retune ourselves to working in new ways. And it's also time to introspect our own businesses. And also thanks to Rashida for putting this all together. Thanks to Pani, thanks to Vamshi, thanks to Mansi of Thai. All of you have put this all together and brought it up so beautifully in front of us. Thank you so much, all of you.